Welcome to the Early Years Summit with me, Kathy Brodie. In this summit, we're exploring speech, language and communication, and today we are discussing the use of language and mathematics. And I'm delighted to be joined by Karen Wilding, self-confessed former maths hater, has been converted to a maths lover. She's an international early years math consultant and conference speaker, published author of the book First Maths Glossary or Visual Guide to Math in the US version, and BBC TV Live Lessons Maths expert. In 2020, Karen developed a specialist online training company for everyone supporting our youngest learner, which is called EY Maths. Since then, thousands of practitioners from all over the world have graduated from her NCTM accredited course. A very, very warm welcome to the Early Years Summit, Karen Wilding.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. It is so great to be back with you.
Oh, well, yes, thank you for coming back on. Last time, obviously, we were talking about subitizing. This time, we are talking about language and maths. I'm really, really excited to find out about the links between language and maths. So, let's start there. How can we develop language through maths?
Oh, well, I'm really excited to talk about this. It's an area I am hugely passionate about. And we know, particularly in light of the pandemic, it's an area that we were already concerned about, our children's development of language. It ties into every area of their learning. And I did want to mention straight away that language obviously is not always about talking. It's about, we have non-verbal communication, but I'm mainly going to be talking about verbal communication today in maths. So my passion is, how can we help children be amazing learners across the whole of the early years curriculum, across their whole life experiences? And I happen to wear a maths hat. So yeah, I'm going to be able to give you some of the top tips on how we can encourage all children to be great communicators.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So let's start at the very beginning then. What sort of language would we be using in maths? Where can we start with that?
Well, I think, we tend to think about, we could look down the route of maths language as in the words we use in mathematics, such as addition and subtraction and shape descriptions. But what I would encourage people to do to begin with is think much more about how can we get children to tell us what it is they're thinking, what it is they're seeing. Language starts by making sure that child doesn't become shut down in the way that they're expecting to respond to us. So that's very, very important. It's something we, those of you who work with very young children will be internally laughing about the fact that young children do tell us exactly what they're thinking. Usually you can't stop them. But very quickly, as young as maybe even towards the end of nursery education of 4, but certainly 5 years old, children have learnt rules about how they should interact, how they should talk, how they should respond to us. And that is having, on the whole, a very negative impact on their learning. And it's not because we intend it to be like that, but what we're doing isn't the right thing. So that's what I'd love to give you some tips on today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think maths sits right at the heart of that. I'm thinking back to the times when I hold my hands up. I've sat with children. How many pencils have I got? What colour is this? And they know that there is a, inverted commas, correct answer. And that's what they're headed for, isn't it? So how can we improve that situation? What are better methods of communicating with children?
Okay, so I've thought of 3 distinct areas that I'd love to share with you, because I want to share with all of you things that will help you think differently, but I also want to give you some how-tos so that we can take some action on what we've heard as well. So I'm going to make everything that we look at completely applicable to whether you are watching this as an interested parent or relative of a child, practitioner, whatever your role is, senior leader, you will be able to see the sense in what I'm saying here. So the first thing, if you've watched our first interview, was we talked about subitizing. And if you haven't watched that, go and note down to go and catch up on that, because I won't go into subitizing today in any depth. But this idea that young children are natural noticers. So, if you've ever been on a walk with a 2 or 3-year-old, you don't get very far because they are picking stuff up off the ground, usually something you don't want them to, and they want you to show you everything. And they are so interested in absolutely everything. So this is a natural skill, and it really links to this idea of subitizing, because they are noticing things and they know what things are. They just haven't got words for them yet. That is a big part of mathematical development, is young children know that they recognize things have something in common. They recognize properties, they recognize amounts. And we've been taught to not accept that they've got that knowledge until they can put a number label to it in the case of maths, or a word to describe a property. And of course, that understanding is there way before the language. And they also understand what we're saying a long time before they can say something. And we understand that in other parts of their development, but we sometimes forget that in mathematics. So that part of noticing is the first thing that I'd love to show you some examples of that anybody could do with their child.
Yeah. Oh, super stuff. So what sort of examples have you got for us, Karen?
Well, I've brought a book because I thought every parent, every practitioner can relate to looking at a book together. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. And the great thing here is you can use any books to make sense of what I'm going to explain here. There isn't anything specific, but I'll find one that is easy to see on the screen. So let's have a look here. In fact, I might even, let's have a look. Let's use the front of the book, so it's going to show up really well here. So this beautiful book here that a lot of people will know. But I'll do this with you, Kathy, if this is okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you to allow your brain to notice some things on that front cover, and don't overthink it. What are you drawn to?
I like the red colour, and I like the cheetah. Is it cheetah in the tree? Because I like yellow. That's my favourite colour. And the fact that the people seem to be going one way and the animals are going the other way.
Okay, so that's really interesting as well. And you've not commented on how many of anything, which this book is all about counting. So a parent reading this we might have already decided that the thing we're going to particularly notice is the how manyness. And yet your brain noticed the colours, you notice things that you knew what they were, you notice things that you like. So you think you are, despite the fact that we're both quite a long way from being 3, 4, or 5 in terms of the area that I specialize in, our brains are not that much different. You're drawn to things that are, attractive to you, things that are familiar to you, things that are meaningful to you. And of course, the more I let you just tell me that, the more I understand about what it is you're processing in your mind. So one of the things that I do in my training all the time is that even with a wonderful book like this that has got masses of potential for us to go down the number sense route, and that is eventually where we would be going with it, not a problem. But I don't want you as a child to shut down from all of the thinking that you're doing. I want to know what you're thinking. I want your brain to stay unlocked, because your brain is going to be full of all those things. And of course, again, it can get quite complicated, but the most simple ways I think of looking at it are, I will say to practitioners, always say to your children, what do you see? Or what do you notice? Say something that's meaningful to them. And then the brilliant thing you can do is when you consistently say that to them, when we're looking at a book, when we're outside and there's nature, like I said about going on a walk with a 2 or 3-year-old, you don't even need to say it, because your children are so used to being given the permission to just say what's in their head. And I know that our younger children do that without us saying it, but our older children are learning, no, I need to wait for a question from the teacher and I need to answer that question. So by being allowed to say what you see, I am, as I say, stopping your brain from shutting down, giving you permission to talk. And for me, one of the most important things is, if, for example, I turn to a page that's about a certain amount. So, for example, here, I don't know how well we can see this double page here.
Yeah.
So this page here is about the number 6 we can see as an adult. Now, can you see there that if you focused in on number 6, I mean, what is it there's 6 of on that page as an adult? What does it want you to pay attention to?
Well, I guess the children. But there's more than 6.
So isn't it interesting? It's, if I get my animals right, the 6 is the wildebeest back here. But when you think about what it is you're noticing and looking at, and like you said there, that there's more than 6, there's so much more to talk about in this book than just 6, isn't there? So it's not at all that I'm saying, don't use this book to teach 6, but you can imagine like that should be like step 10 or step 20 of what we're doing, because you and I, looking at this, we want to talk about what's happening, and we want to ask questions. And we're not 3, 4, and 5. You think a 3, 4, or 5-year-old, I liken this to going into a National Trust property for me. I walk into a huge room that's not like any room in my house. It's full of stuff I've never seen before. And I spend my time just looking around going, what does that do? What is that? And my brain is in cognitive overload. Now, for the average 3, 4, or 5-year-old that hasn't grown up in this environment, won't they be full of, I'm noticing this, I'm seeing this, I'm wondering about this, I know what that is, I don't know what that is. Are these dogs? Are these cows? Because they're trying to link it to what they know. And the danger is when we say, oh, look, 6, and we start either just counting or subitizing, we've just lost all of that stuff that's in that child's head that they could have talked about. That's one major thing. But the other thing is, if I say, for example, so, why do you think the people are sitting under the tree, for example, which sounds like a very innocent, appropriate question to a young child. You say it with a big smile on your face. Problem is, right, you're sitting there 4 or 5 years old. You weren't thinking that. You were thoroughly involved in this amazing stuff that was going on. You have to then hear my question, which may be in the second language for you, and you're only 4, make sense of my question, process what it meant, then think what you think, then put that into language, and then send it back out. Can you see why so few children speak? And a lot of our, we have, if I wanted to, stereotype a bit here, a lot of our boys, a lot of our younger learners, the children who come from, less language rich backgrounds for whatever reason, and they just learn when the teacher asks a question, I don't know what to say, so I just switch off. You think there's so many things in there, aren't there, about why are we doing this? Why not just say, what do you see? And then what will happen, which you and I probably would have done eventually, is if I start saying to you about, you started talking, and then you might say, oh, look, that's a little one. And we start realizing that maybe there are some children, there are some adults. There comes a point when wondering how many, and we would often, often not say how many because it tends to lead to counting, but we'd actually talk about how many-ness, the cardinality. Yeah. That conversation does become relevant, but it's quite far down the line. So does all of that make sense?
Yeah, oh, most definitely. And I have to say that sometimes when you do books with children, the thing that they do latch onto is other children in the book. And I've always thought that about books that do counting and so on, with creatures, with animals, with things. It's like the children are less interested in that and more interested in other children and other faces. And that's the thing. It's the person holding the tray of ladybirds that they're more interested in than the actual ladybirds.
Yeah, and they see things. You think children's eyesight generally, of course, is very, very good compared to adults, and their brains, my knowledge of neurology is quite limited, but I know that you have unbelievable brain capacity when you're young. You've got far more connections, and of course we cull those connections as we get older. So when they look at a book that's got loads going on, and again, so this, and I can't see an example on here, but they notice something really tiny that we have as an adult blocked out because we either know what it is and we're not interested, or we genuinely we're paying attention to the big stuff, and they'll tell you about this thing here. And because they don't know what it's called, they're talking, and we're looking at them like, what are you talking about? And we don't mean to do that face, but then they learn that face is like, you're saying the wrong thing. Be quiet. Tell me the thing I want to know about. And all that happens is we shut them up. And when we're talking about language, you think surely the main thing about language we should always be talking about is how do you get children to turn what they're thinking into words? And how do you get them to unlock? So we've seen children when we've done this. There's another beautiful book here that I know a lot of you practitioners will know, that when you hold up a book and you don't even say anything, and you certainly don't say things like, what will the rabbit do next, which is the sort of thing I used to say, thinking that's not what they were thinking. I don't mean in this book, obviously, but they start to not only talk when they look at things like this, but we saw children in the sand area and with other children who weren't talking before, they suddenly started talking because we had unblocked something that said, in school you're quiet, in school you don't know what's going on, so don't say anything.
Yeah. Well, that is absolutely fascinating, and through maths books there as well. So you've got Anna's book there. How would you actually use that then with children?
Okay, so this is a book that you will see come up a lot. It is absolutely fantastic. But I'd like to apply what we've just been doing there in the sense of be careful with your adult agenda. Your adult agenda can be there, but needs to come much further down the line as far as I'm concerned. So if I just ask you, Kathy, that is not very easy to see. And imagine you're a child who you may or may not know what this is, but on the picture, what do you see? What do you notice?
I see that as a path through the snow. It's a snowy path.
Okay, so a path, or I think it goes on to be a river, but it doesn't matter. But interestingly, this page is implying that there's nothing. That's what the author wants us to notice. There's nothing. Now, you've already just said there is something.
And it could be a couple of things as well, couldn't it? Because it could also be seen the other way as being a tornado touching down. There's definitely something there, definitely.
Yeah. And even as an adult, if we said like, well, this is some sort of hillside, or this is the sky. Yeah. So straight away, one, we've got noticing, but also we've got this idea that in your children's head, what the author, who's an adult, is aiming for us to show them, maybe limiting. So again, I say it's a beautiful book, but I think we can get so much more out of it. So see if the same applies here. This page is about one. So again, I'll try and keep it in focus. So if I just said to you, what do you notice? You can imagine the conversations that could go on there.
Absolutely, yes, and so much more rich than just one. Wow, there's a whole story. You could literally have a whole story out of that one picture, couldn't you? Because it's gorgeous. And yes, now I see that probably is a river. That makes more sense now as well. There's lots going on in that picture.
Yeah, and the idea that at 3, 4, and 5, you are not going to see what's going on that page as one. Because you don't categorize like that. What the author wants us to think is one bird, one sun, one skier, one house. But of course, your brain doesn't work like that when you're a child. One, you've got a subitizing brain. So your brain actually sees patterns of amounts that it can or can't label as numbers yet. But actually, even as an adult, I'm thinking, well, there's quite a lot of things there. And there's one thing there. And then and there's 2 things there, and there's 1 thing there. The thing I'm not doing, because it's not that relevant to me, is thinking, but actually a bird's in a different category than a tree. So therefore there's 1 tree and 1 bird. Because actually the two-ness of that is more obvious to us, even as adults, isn't it? That the fact is, you might talk about the tree and the bird, but the idea that it's a 1 and a 1, which is what this book wants us to think about, and what people, when we're teaching about one thing, may think, oh, it's a great book for that. It is, but your children have to have gone through a huge amount of noticing and categorizing before really the thing they're going to be interested in doing is taking the oneness out. Because again, look here at this house. For me, the oneness, I want to talk about the fact there's there's a 10 frame there. If you know what a 10 frame is, you've got 2 windows, 2 chimneys. I'm interested in the fact that person's skiing and that person isn't. And you think, so again, it's this limitation. And what's so lovely, I mean, this book is gorgeous, but if I turn the next page, you'll start to notice about adult levels of understanding. Can you see that the snow is melted?
It's beginning to melt. Yeah. And now the river's bigger.
So our young children are expected to know, unless we are very sensitive to this. So go back to that first page. You and I know that scene there, and if I go back to where we've got some greenery, that scene there, they're connected. How much understanding and life experience do you have to have of snow melting to make sense of that, apart from the fact that buildings have been built? So actually, even the sense that this is, maybe we could say as adults, this is happening in a year. They've definitely got better builders around them than I have living near me, because I've never seen progress like that before. But you can see there's an awful lot of, if we just limit it to what the book wants us to do, and we're there merrily talking about, let's subitize the 3 or count the 3. There's so much that isn't 3. And actually then you could at one point go and say, well, this page is about 3. What can we see 3 of? But on the church, you think, well, There's only one church. So now we've got to categorize that apparently we're looking at buildings and they don't even look the same. So really those points there being, make life easier for yourself, make life much easier for your children. Do not ask them to process your questions. Constantly just ask them what they see. Constantly listen to them. And look at books. I won't go through this one, but this is another beautiful example of a book that a lot of your listeners, watchers will know. But it can be very limiting if we use it the way the person who wrote the book designed it. Start off with that, what do you know? And then by all means in time, look at the how manyness of the amounts. Of course, you've got masses of other properties as well to do with shape and space and so forth.
Yeah. I just think that is fascinating. Wow. And of course, the other thing is that we make assumptions, don't we? As you say, we assume that children know about the snow's going to melt and that trees don't just grow during the spring, that you're not going to get a 10-foot fir tree just in one season, are you? But that book suggests you might do. So, making those, we know that as adults, as you say, but making those assumptions is so dangerous, isn't it? It really is. So, Karen, you said you had 3 things. That's the first thing. What's your second thing?
So the second point for developing language builds on what we've just done there beautifully. And we've already alluded to it. And it's the fact that in order to get children to be rich in language, we have to be much better listeners. So I talk about, not having an agenda in your head. Of course, ultimately, you have got an objective that you are aiming for or at certain levels of experiences. But it's a bit like going on a walk, I think, that you absolutely need to know where you're going in order to head in the right direction. But if you spend the whole walk then thinking about the destination, it's not going to be a walk that you will maximize opportunities in and thoroughly enjoy. And I think that makes sense to all of us. So once you know what it is you are aiming to give them experience of, let go of that. Empty your brain, which is the hardest thing in the world for adults to do, particularly those of us that teach. But you will be so much better off, of course. My practitioners who've learned to do this say, I'm so much more myself. I'm so much more relaxed. I'm so much, I'm not like the teacher version of me, which of course, that might not be a bad thing, but it's like, just be you. So when they talk to their children, I say, guess what in the teacher's head sounds like. We've all been party to that. You are sitting there as an adult on a course or when you were a child and the teacher wants you to say something and you want to get it right and you want that acknowledgement and that praise. And just like I said before, most children do not know what to say. And the ones who do often turn into memorizers. They are brilliant at listening to you in a way that they can say what you said and you're still not hearing what they think. So generally not a good plan, although very well intentioned and very familiar to all of us. So instead, when I'm looking at a book like we're looking at there, we say, what do you see? Or we're outside and they're doing their loose parts, their transient art, or they're in forest schools, wherever they are, looking up at the sky, at the clouds. When we genuinely listen with no agenda in our heads, we react very, very differently. And I call it neutral face, because when you've got an agenda, you will get an awful lot of that kind of nodding that my grandma used to do to me when I'd be telling her about something and she was like, oh, yes, dear. I'm thinking, you're not really listening to me. And you're being nice, but it's like it's bouncing off you. Whereas those adults that we know in our life who are brilliant listeners, which I have to say they're quite rare because most people are thinking of what they're going to say next when they're listening. Those people like that, they're like sponges. They just make you feel amazing because they take in what you're saying. And when we behave like that around our children, we tend to do a lot less of the kind of nodding, smiling, yes, that's right, kind of well-meaning behavior, because what that really says to children is, that's what I was thinking. That matches what I wanted. Whereas when we listen, they will look to us and we look interested and we want more information and we are thinking about things. Your face very naturally does things that tell the person, I am deeply engaged in what you're talking about, which for me, and I think everyone really, you cannot pay anyone a higher compliment than being interested in them. People think saying well done and so forth. And you think, actually, hang on a minute, think about it yourself. When someone truly listens to you and doesn't pass judgment or comment, but really takes it in, it makes you feel amazing. And young children are drawn to adults who treat them like that. So that wonderful respect. And of course, how easy is that as an adult? Just listen. Just listen. Just remember, you're not 3, you're not 4, you're not 5. You're not seeing the world they are. It's such a privilege to be around a child because they don't filter out stuff like we do, because they don't know what anything is yet. Everything is new. Everything is unfamiliar, apart from, a couple of parts of their lives like home life and so forth. So be a great listener and really think, am I trying to stop myself pulling faces, which that's like Botox face, where you can feel it twitching and you think, hang on, you're still matching what they're saying with something? Or are you in this wonderful place where you think, these kids are really talking to me and I'm learning so much about them by doing so?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of that does sound like the sustained shared thinking, doesn't it? That backwards and forwards and learning from the children, because as you say, you have to put on a face at the beginning, and, listening and true listening is a skill. It is an art. But then once you actually learn to do it after a little while, and it does take practice, you suddenly realise that children are infinitely more interesting than whatever curriculum you happen to be working towards, or whatever the Ofsted inspector's looking for. They are just brilliant, and they're so imaginative and creative, and suddenly you find you're not having to try. It comes naturally, doesn't it?
It does. And you think, that their capacity to make sense of things, that when you think of how young they are, you think, how can they make sense of this? They have, anybody who is a parent or a practitioner around young children, when you do learn to listen, they have an ability to make sense of things which are way beyond their experiences. And they blow you away with the way they can make connections, the way that they philosophize about things. Is that right, Phyllis? Yeah. I'm sure I didn't say that right. But yeah, they are so philosophical. But they just have this amazing ability to wonder what if and that kind of thing. And you think this is incredible. And then, as you say, it stops us limiting our curriculum, because they are truly capable of looking at science and wondering about the world and expressing themselves in ways that go way beyond what we can sometimes be led to believe young children need to experience.
Wow, there is so much to think about there already, Karen. Just absolutely loads. But you said you had 3 ideas to discuss with us today. What's your third?
Well, the third one is capturing it. And we live in a world where, sadly, capturing what children do in a practitioner's mind, and I remember this very much from my own practice, is having to prove we've taught children things, somehow proving that they've learned by the fact that we've taken a photograph of it and stuck it in a book, and this awful things like that when I mentioned something like documentation, that could be the first thing that practitioners that are watching this will think about. But what instead I'm doing with the people that work with me, and we are seeing the most phenomenal impact on practitioner knowledge and many, many other pluses that I'll mention, is when you capture, imagine a child looking at some plants or noticing, particularly this time of the year in the UK, we're in the middle of spring, early summer, everything is growing, things are changing at a phenomenal rate. Given the opportunity, given a hand lens, children will just talk and notice the wonder that is nature. And you think, when you see a child involved in something and they're making sense of it and they're using language that's meaningful to them, which would be language that you'd never use because they're trying to describe what it is they see and the colours and all sorts of things, you capture that, maybe with my subitizing hat on. We're doing the sunflower challenge coming up. So maybe they've looked at a dead sunflower head, it would be at this time of the year, and they've seen the dried sunflower seeds, and they're on the ground and they're looking at where they've come from, and they start to notice that maybe how many they are, and they're using their subitizing skills to do that. And you think, you capture that and you say, okay, so what did the child say or do? Because it might be nonverbal communication. And then this insight into, well, what is it they're making sense of? What is it, I think, with my growing subject and pedagogical knowledge, that I could see the child applying these tools or trying to solve a problem, which actually now I realize I need to give them more tools in order to help them pursue this line of questioning in future. So we've been looking at this in many, many different ways, but it is simply, imagine a beautiful photograph, say literally these days, we're talking about using a tablet. We're talking about using technology that is readily available. Many of my practitioners use things like Seesaw and Tapestry to communicate with parents already. So we're just doubling up here. We've got photograph, a little bit of dialogue that we've typed in, a little bit of a pedagogical reference here. And we're putting those into something we call floor books. And a floor book in its simplest form is, an A3 sketchpad type book that you get from a cheap stationer's or online, nothing fancy. We stick the picture in like that, or we put it up on the wall. And what happens is the children see themselves in that book or on the wall, and they start to talk about, that's me, and I was doing this. The practitioners that work with them start reflecting on the pedagogical link and the fact that there's an objective observation there, and so I use that word carefully because some people observation, but a capturing of a moment, an insight from the practitioner. Because it's a floor book, it's portable. So I always recommend that people have 4 or 5 of them, even if they've only got one picture in each and not replicated, because when it comes to children being picked up, put those near where the parents come in, make it safe for the parents, because a lot of parents are obviously very intimidated by settings, particularly if you haven't got a shared language yet. You put them there, the children talk to their parents about what they're doing, what the other children are doing in their first language, parents engaging, feeling more confident about what's happening, how are the children learning. It is win-win. And of course, Ofsted inspectors, leaders of multi-academy trusts, whatever you've got in your life where you think, I call them interested adults. They're the least important people in my life. The children and the practitioners and the families are who sit in the middle, I think, for all of us. But of course, we want to educate the people who come into our settings and want to know what we're doing and how we're doing it. And this does it so beautifully. And I cannot tell you the shift that this has caused in practitioners thinking, oh my goodness, my knowledge is just phenomenal, my confidence. And that vignette of a child talking in their home language to a family member, you think, isn't that what we're all after? Don't we want to see that? And you think you don't need to speak the home language to see what it is they're talking about and how they're communicating. And it's really beautiful.
Yes, and of course for the senior leadership team as well. And I get emails all the time from people saying that they're working in the nursery that's attached to a school. How do I explain to my head teacher that we're not just playing, we're not just got the paints out today, we're not just running around in the wind. Wow, what a fabulous thing for a head teacher to come in and actually see that happening right in front of their eyes and hear the language and see the richness. I mean, that covers everything as far as the curriculum is concerned as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing now is exactly that. We have got examples in, I have a membership called Impact, which is my monthly group. And this is where we've done the most development because I'm in with these people, pretty much every single day. And we have seen practitioners say, no one ever came to see my maths in the nursery. And maybe I would have even struggled to explain our maths beyond what we'd all stereotypically think of. And now, not only do I kind of say to people, come in and see what we're doing, but when Ofsted came in one of the cases recently, the practitioner saying, I changed nothing because the richness of what we do every day is so obvious. The documentation explains to anyone who doesn't understand how subitizing and 5 frames and 10 frames and so forth work. It shows them the journey from an adult point of view, because that's for my team and that's for my parents to understand. And like you say, we've got practitioners now saying, I'm so confident and I'm being recognized and I'm not being asked to do a diluted form of what's happening further up the school. Quite the opposite. We're realizing that the problems we're seeing further up the school are caused by not having the right tools in our children's toolboxes, and we couldn't have given them those tools in the past because we didn't know what they were either. So that is a really lovely outcome of, rather than you need to do more sooner, it's like, no, we need to do what we do better in order, and then you need to carry this on because this is why we're seeing the problems we are further up the school.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a great point you've made there as well. You don't know what you don't know. We've always done it like that. As I say, I've sat and had children counting pencils and naming colours because at that time, that's what I thought was needed. Obviously, I know better because I've watched a lot of your videos now. But you've spoken about your Impact membership there. So tell me what sort of members have you got? What sort of things do you do with your members in there?
Well, we've been together now for 2 years, and obviously I've got new people joining all the time. But my members go on a journey with me, and we look at all the things that are going to make such a big difference to your practice instantly. So my new members come in, and we have like special little parts of a library for them, so they feel confident and everything in what they're going to do, because they come in because they want to change. They come in because they feel things aren't right. I think a lot of us know this. We're scrabbling around looking for activities on the internet because we're trying to do something. And there's a real fear. There's people constantly saying, how do I do this? Share your planning. So you think, hang on a minute, put the brakes on. It's because we need investing in, and we don't need investing in on one day or even 2 days. We need investing in when we need it, which is you want somewhere to come and ask a question, somewhere to come and have a cry, somewhere to come and shout about your tiny little win that no one else understands. And we represent that. So people come in and we look at, for example, self-registration with our children right from nursery, and the power of things like a 5 frame being full and not full. We don't go straight in with amounts, which is, again, really gets people thinking about. Young children are very, very good at understanding when something is full, not full, finished, not finished, fair, not fair. And we link that to early subitizing. So we build up, like at the moment, we're looking at building learning trajectories in number sense by using what we're calling the peg and paper technique, which is where we notice something a child is doing or children are doing. We record that either by hand or using simple technology on a piece of paper. And then when we notice something else, that's on another piece of paper, and we notice something else, that's on another piece of paper, and we literally peg it up on a washing line, and we have a discussion. Most of our washing lines are this way, but some are this way. Which comes first? Because this is what our children are doing. Let's develop a trajectory to understand, rather than thinking, I've got to come up with the trajectory. Your kids are doing this stuff. Notice it, understand it. And we've ended up with parallel trajectories because we're saying this is happening at the same time. And that's a really good example of the world we're in, where we have what's called the Impact Lounge. My members come on and they share what they're doing, and then they question each other, and then we have a call together, and someone comes on and says, I've done all this and I've done all that, and then Austin came in and they said this, or we're in this together. It's such I've never ever had such a privileged role, because I used to have to do lots of one-offs. And no matter how hard I tried or people tried, when people went back into their setting, that's when they need someone. You need someone to go, I can't remember what she meant when she said this. My notes don't make sense. I'm struggling with this. And Impact provides people with that opportunity. And because we don't tie anyone into the membership, you come in for as long as you need us. We're here to help. It's phenomenal. And I feel so lucky to work with the people that I do.
Yeah. And of course, it's across the nursery into school, so you get that lovely crossover as well between, well, this is what I'm, at the end of their nursery time, I'm going to put them into reception, and the reception teacher saying, this is what we're finding. The nursery going, oh, that's because we're doing this. That's why they know this. That crossover is invaluable, isn't it?
It is, and the members represent that so well. We have now got childminders, teaching assistants, and most people pay their own memberships as well. There are some that have got schools that realise that a year's membership is equivalent to a day's course, which obviously you think, but most of them funding themselves because they're so dedicated to what they're doing. But we've got nursery practitioners that are in private, voluntary, independent sector. We've got nursery and reception practitioners. We've got international groups. So, of course, because most of the rest of the world don't start school as early as we do in the UK, especially in England, we have in Australia, for example, lots of practitioners with 5 and 6 year olds. I've got a university lecturer is in the group, head teachers, groups of practitioners together. It's so wonderful to be able to be on a call and say, what do you do for a living? Because people, the thing we have in common is we work with 3 to 5 year olds, and many work with 0 to 3s, and some work with 5 and 6 year olds as well. So it's given me such a wonderful equity because of that international and all of those roles in one place. It's given people somewhere to go. I mean, where did we have to go in the past to have that sense of safeness and professional development? So
Oh, and especially around maths as well, because I still think that there is a nervousness amongst practitioners and educators about, you say maths, you can see the fear lighting up in their eyes, can't you? So it's lovely, as you say, to have somewhere safe to go where you go, you know what, I've got no idea. When you're talking, what's this subitizing you're talking about? I've got no idea. So to actually go somewhere and be able to say that and then be supported by others, I think is just amazing for maths.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said. You don't know what you don't know. So the typical thing, I've been through this, all my members go through this, is they'll hear an interview like this interview today, or watch a bit of training from me or someone else, and suddenly have this, why didn't I know this? This makes so much sense. And if you're like you and I, and you've been in education quite a few decades, we, of course, go, I feel stupid, I feel guilty, I feel bad. And my job as well is to say, I understand that feeling, but you didn't have those tools in your toolbox yet. So you couldn't have done anything any differently. It is wonderful that whatever stage you are in your practice, in terms of how many years you've done it, to find out you didn't know something, and then to be in a world where you're going to be able to find out how to do it and be supported and work at your own pace. I think that is one of the greatest privileges and exciting things that could ever happen to you as a practitioner. It's staying in the dark that's the horrible thing, isn't it? Yeah. I don't want to not know what I don't know. I'm up for that every single day of my life.
Yeah, no, I'd love to be in that situation if I was back in a setting to say, right, bring on Ofsted, because I'm going to show them exactly what it's all about, and I'm going to teach them because that I'm so confident in what I'm doing. That's a fabulous feeling, surely.
Absolutely. And I have to say that we haven't had a story where people haven't been receptive. In terms of inspectors, every story has been positive. The most difficult one has been, for example, when somebody's had a very set agenda about what they think maths is, and all we do in our group is say, well, we all had that agenda at one point. So let's remember, and the reason we had that agenda was because we didn't know what we didn't know. So we need to appreciate that, not be defensive with it, because obviously that doesn't help the process. Say, well, it's purely because this person doesn't know what they don't know yet, so I need to make this more visible. And the practitioner I'm thinking about, day one had comments of, well, I can't see any maths, when there was maths everywhere. Day two dealt with it in an amazingly professional way. I'm sure she had a bit of a moment, but came in and made sure that her and her team knew exactly how to show the inspectors what they were looking for and more in what they were doing in a really, really positive, knowledgeable way. And then he came out of that fantastically. So again, there's a lesson in there, isn't there, about we feel frustrated so much, but we have an opportunity to educate everyone around us, our own teams, our families, the people who come and inspect us and, are slightly removed from our settings. And we haven't been able to do that as successfully as we'd like in the past because we haven't had the investment in our own subject and pedagogical knowledge, because passion on its own, of course, isn't enough. Passionate doctors, I find, are not as good as passionate doctors with medical knowledge. Is always my analogy. You can be easily mistaken, can't you, by somebody who's enthusiastic, and you're like, oh, do you know what you're doing? It's more important.
Exactly. Yeah, you definitely need a knowledge base, definitely. So where can we find out more about EY Maths? Where are you?
The easiest thing is my website is www.eymaths.co.uk. I regularly run challenges through the year that anybody can join, and I would warmly welcome everyone. And there's also a lot of free training. My kind of entry level, which they'll find you and me on as well from our last interview, is we've got Karen Wilding EY Maths YouTube channel. So there is no reason for anyone not to be able to come and learn with me instantly for no cost whatsoever. Grab a cuppa, go on that YouTube channel would be my, invitation. Click on some of those things, find something you love and go with it. And then I say, come over to our website, and there are some super subitizing cards, 14 cards for free top of the homepage. Probably need to make them a bit more visible. Maybe put them on the homepage as well. But click on there and we'll send you 14 beautiful cards to show you what subotising is, how to do it, and you'll see how it links in with what we've talked about today, because noticing particularly is mentioned a lot.
Oh, that is excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. And I will make sure that the links both to the YouTube and directly to your website and those cards are in the words that go along with the video, so you can click through and have a little look. You can see it there on the screen. Well, Karen Wilding, thank you so much for joining us on the Early Years Summit. I feel sure that we're going to be coming back and talking about more maths again another day. But for the minute, thank you very much indeed for being on the Early Years Summit, all about speech, language and communication.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always thoroughly enjoyable and a real privilege, Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Karen. And I look forward to welcoming everybody to the next session on the Early Years Summit, all about speech, language and communication.
Ship alone.